First Saudi air raid on Yemen has claimed the lives of nearly 24 people. 23 people, including women and children, were killed near the southwestern city of Taiz. The airstrike targeted a transport vehicle in the area of Sha'abu in the west of Taiz. The victims were on their way back from a popular market in Muwaza Directorate. Saudi Arabia began its deadly war on Yemen in March 2015. The destructive military campaign has left over 12,040 Yemenis dead and millions more displaced. Chris McGrane, activist and political commentator, joins us from Lancashire. Chris McGrane, so you have all the things that are going on, which are really, I mean, I don't want to use the word depressing. It's beyond even, it's hard to grasp it. You have a child dying every 10 minutes. You have a cholera outbreak that's claimed almost 300 lives. You have, of course, the bombing that's going on. The UN Secretary General said, you know, what we need is access. And then the other news, the U.S. is almost sealing up a deal worth $100 billion with Saudi Arabia in arms sales. It doesn't quite make sense where there should be a push for humanity's sake, and yet you have arms sales happening between, for example, Yemen and the U.S.
Well, you're right. I would call it, it's very depressing. Basically, what's going on in Yemen at the moment, if there is any definition of a war crime, this is definitely it. As you said earlier, since the beginning of this war, we've seen 12,000 civilians hit. The Saudi government have been deliberately targeting civilians. We've seen funerals being bombed repeatedly in Yemen. Any gathering of more than 4 people, they consider it as a threat and fire their bombs at it. It is rather telling that America and Britain as well, are very adamant to carry on this massive sale of arms to Saudi Arabia. Of course, the more bombs Saudi Arabia drop, those weapons need replacing, which means more money for Western imperialism. And of course, we do have this cholera outbreak, which under any normal circumstances would need some sort of humanitarian corridor. What we're seeing recently with humanitarian aid to Yemen is absolutely minimal and is being hindered by the Saudis. They are completely controlling the situation, and no Western media is being allowed to fairly portray what is actually happening here. I find it an interesting double standard. Compare the coverage of the situation in Yemen to, say, what we saw in Aleppo or even in Mosul, where we're constantly getting, I wouldn't say a critical view, but the governments are being pressed. Why are you doing this? Why are you bombing these terrorists? None of that seems to be happening in Yemen. Yemen are just being completely left to the wolves, as it would be.
Thank you for that, Chris McGrane, activist and political commentator from Lancashire.